I had always loved the silence of the countryside. My land sat at the far edge of the town, a few acres of soft, golden soil that caught the sun each morning and glowed like it held a secret. My father had bought it 30 years ago, back when this entire area was nothing but farmland and dust roads. He used to say, "Land is the only thing they're not making more of, son. Protect it." And I did. I kept it fenced, cleaned, and registered under my name after he passed. To me, it wasn't just property, it was memory, legacy, and peace. 4 years, nothing changed. The city expanded slowly, inching closer every year, but my plot remained untouched. I lived a simple life, worked in town, came back every evening to check on the land, sometimes sitting by the old fig tree with a cup of tea, watching the sunset. It was my father's land, my pride, and my responsibility. Then one morning, I saw dust rising in the distance. At first, I thought it was just another truck from the nearby construction zone. But as I got closer, my heart dropped. On my property stood a group of men, unloading machinery. They were measuring, digging, and hammering posts into the ground. Bright orange helmets gleamed in the sunlight, and a banner fluttered in the breeze, future site of evergreen villas, developed by Greenfield HOA. For a few moments, I thought I was dreaming. I parked my truck and walked straight to the site manager. "Excuse me," I said, my voice shaking but calm. "What are you doing here?" He looked up, slightly annoyed, then replied, "Sir, this is private property owned by the HOA of Greenfield. You'll need to stand back." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because of the absurdity of it all. "Private property? This land is mine," I said, pulling the deed papers from my glove compartment, the same papers I'd carried ever since my father died. He frowned, glanced at them for half a second, then shrugged. "You'll need to talk to our legal department, sir. We're just following orders." That was the moment my stomach sank. Something wasn't right. They had paperwork, permits, and an entire construction plan already in motion. The strange part? The county records office had somehow listed this land under Greenfield Development Area. A clerical mistake, maybe, or something far more deliberate. Over the next week, I visited the county office 3 times. Each time, I was told the same thing: "We'll look into it." Bureaucracy moved slower than a turtle in molasses. Meanwhile, heavy machinery rolled over my soil. Excavators carved deep foundations. Cement trucks came and went. I watched my land, my father's land, transform into a battlefield of noise and dust. My neighbors started whispering. "Did you sell your property?" one of them asked. I shook my head every time, but the shame burned inside me. I wasn't just losing land, I was losing respect and control. One night, I sat on my porch, watching the distant glow of construction lights. The air smelled of wet concrete and betrayal. I opened the deed again, reading every line under the dim lamp. It was valid. Stamped. Recorded. My signature. My name. Then I noticed something strange, an addendum filed months after my last visit to the county office. It had a forged signature. Someone had transferred temporary development rights to the Greenfield HOA. My jaw tightened. They thought they could outsmart me. I could have called the police, or stormed into their site the next morning, but I didn't. Instead, I decided to wait. I wanted to see how far they would go, how much money they'd pour into building villas on land that was never theirs. Because one thing my father taught me better than anything was patience. He used to say, "The man who knows when not to act is the one who wins the real fight." So, I watched them build. Weeks turned into months. 12 villas rose from the soil, white walls, glass balconies, tiled roofs shining under the sun. They called it Evergreen Luxury Villas, Phase 1 complete. Families started visiting the site with brochures in hand, marveling at the architecture, the view, the location value. I stood across the road sometimes, wearing sunglasses and pretending to be just another curious passerby. No one suspected a thing. No one knew that the man quietly watching from the other side owned the ground beneath their dream homes. It was infuriating and satisfying all at once, watching them build their own trap. By the time the last villa's paint dried, I had gathered everything: original deeds, proof of forgery, photos of construction, even video evidence of them crossing into my property lines. I met with a lawyer in town, a sharp old man named Mr. Callahan, who smiled as soon as I showed him the documents. "They made a big mistake," he said, adjusting his glasses. "You're going to own more than just that land when we're done." And that was when I knew patience had paid off. I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready. The villas stood tall, beautiful, and illegal, every brick a silent confession. By the time Evergreen Villas officially opened for viewings, I had already gathered enough evidence to choke a courtroom. But still, I waited. I wanted them to finish, to feel safe, confident, untouchable. It wasn't revenge I was after, it was justice wrapped in precision. From the outside, the villas gleamed like jewels. Perfect landscaping, imported marble, and banners that read luxury living in harmony. Harmony, I thought, standing at the edge of my fence line. The irony made me smile. The HOA had become the pride of the town. They hosted open houses, brought in investors, and even made a feature on the local news. The mayor cut the ribbon. Everyone applauded. Nobody knew that every nail, every wall, and every drop of paint sat on a lie. But the louder they celebrated, the calmer I became. I had spent nights studying real estate law, boundary acts, and property fraud statutes. My lawyer, Mr. Callahan, taught me how to prepare for battle, not with rage, but with records. We cross-referenced county archives, found the exact moment the fake addendum was filed, and traced the digital signature to a Greenfield HOA manager named Thomas Kent. Kent was bold, arrogant, and careless, the kind of man who thought paperwork was a formality, not a weapon. He had used a local clerk, paid under the table, to quietly reassign the development rights on my parcel. It wasn't a mistake, it was a crime. One afternoon, I decided to visit the site openly. I walked straight up the driveway of Villa No. 4, where a team of workers were fixing interior tiles. The foreman recognized me from before. "Sir, you again? I told you, you can't be here." "This is my land," I said evenly, "and I can stand wherever I like." He hesitated, just enough to show fear. I smiled politely and stepped back. "Don't worry. I won't stop you. Keep building. You're almost done." He didn't know what to say. I turned around and left, the crunch of gravel under my boots echoing like a countdown. That night, under the porch light, I drafted the first legal notice. It wasn't a lawsuit yet, just a declaration of ownership and violation notice. Mr. Callahan reviewed it the next morning and grinned. "Send it," he said. "Let them sweat." We delivered copies to the county office, to the HOA headquarters, and to Thomas Kent's desk directly. Within 2 days, I received a call. "Mr. Anderson," a calm voice said. "This is Lisa from Greenfield HOA. There seems to be some confusion." "No confusion," I interrupted. "Your company built 12 villas on land you don't own." "Well," she said, carefully measured, "we have the permits." "Forged," I replied. "Filed illegally under a fraudulent signature. I can prove it." There was silence. Then she said, "Perhaps we can meet and resolve this privately." I almost laughed. "Privately? You've poured millions into someone else's dirt. There's nothing private about that." I hung up. Within a week, the HOA sent their lawyers. Sleek suits, shiny shoes, and fake smiles. They offered money, a lot of it. "Mr. Anderson," their lead attorney began, "it seems there's been a mix-up in documentation. We're willing to compensate you fairly for your cooperation." I leaned back, hands folded. "Cooperation? You mean silence?" "Think of it as a partnership," he said. I looked out the window toward the villas gleaming in the sunlight. "I already have a partnership," I said. "With the law." Their faces stiffened. They realized I wasn't bluffing. Over the next few months, the conflict escalated quietly but sharply. They tried to stall, file counterclaims, and even attempted to have my original deed re-evaluated. But I had dated photographs, tax receipts, and county statements spanning decades. The HOA's paper trail was a patchwork of deceit, and it was unraveling fast. Still, I didn't rush to court. I wanted the villas completely sold. I wanted families moved in, keys handed over, contracts signed. Because once they did that, the HOA would be liable not just for property fraud, but also for defrauding homebuyers. That's when the news turned against them. Rumors spread that Greenfield HOA had built on disputed land. Local reporters started sniffing around. A small real estate blog ran an article titled Evergreen Villas, the development with a secret. Thomas Kent held a press conference to deny everything. All documentation is legitimate, he said confidently. These claims are baseless. I watched him on television, sipping coffee, smiling. He had no idea that my lawyer was already preparing the full lawsuit. Late one evening, I drove to the edge of my property again. The villas looked calm under the moonlight, like a sleeping army that didn't know its commander was already defeated. I ran my fingers along the fence line and whispered, "You took what wasn't yours. But now, you've built your empire on my ground, and that means I own it all." That night, we filed the official lawsuit. Anderson vs. Greenfield HOA and Thomas Kent, property fraud, forgery, and unlawful construction. The next morning, my phone buzzed non-stop. HOA representatives, reporters, even county officials called. They wanted statements, explanations, or settlements. But it was too late. The case was public. The court date was set. And for the first time in months, I slept peacefully. The morning of the hearing was cold and gray, the kind of morning that felt heavy with meaning. I arrived early, carrying a thick folder that contained the last 2 years of my life, every photograph, deed, and document that would prove what I already knew in my bones: the land was mine. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and disinfectant. People whispered in the hallway, reporters shuffled near the entrance, and the Greenfield HOA lawyers stood in a tight circle, murmuring strategy like generals before battle. At the center of it all was Thomas Kent, adjusting his tie and flashing that same arrogant grin I'd seen on TV. He caught my eye and smirked. "Mr. Anderson," he said, walking over. "You know, we could have avoided all this." I looked at him evenly. "Yes," I said. "You could have." Mr. Callahan, my lawyer, placed a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Let him talk. His pride will hang him before the judge does." When the gavel struck and court came to order, everything else faded, the whispers, the cameras, even the sound of my own breath. It was just me, them, and the truth. The HOA's attorneys started strong. They presented glossy documents, maps, and permits, trying to prove that the development rights had been legally obtained. Their lead counsel, a woman named Rebecca Moore, spoke smoothly, almost hypnotically, as if confidence could bend the law itself. "Your Honor," she said, "this project was approved through proper channels. The plaintiff's claim rests on an administrative error, not criminal intent." I could feel my jaw tighten. Administrative error. That's what they called stealing land and building $12 million homes on it. Then it was our turn. Mr. Callahan rose slowly, his gray suit sharp against the polished floor. "Your Honor," he began, "we intend to show that this so-called administrative error was not only deliberate but executed through a web of forgery, bribery, and deceit, all orchestrated by Greenfield HOA." He gestured toward me. "My client's father bought this land in 1992. We have the original deed, notarized and recorded. Every tax payment since then bears his family name. But, Your Honor, in March 2021, after decades of uncontested ownership, a false addendum appeared in the county system, transferring development rights to the HOA. That addendum carried a forged signature, a falsified timestamp, and an illegally inserted clerk's approval code." He handed the judge a printed copy, highlighting the inconsistencies in red ink. The judge adjusted her glasses. "You're saying this was intentional fraud?" "Yes, Your Honor," Callahan said calmly. And we have the digital audit trail to prove it. That was the moment the tide shifted. We displayed the server logs, obtained through a court-ordered subpoena, showing the exact user ID that had altered the land record. The name glowed on the screen in bold white letters: T. Kent Greenfield Admin Access. Gasps filled the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. Kent's face went pale. Callahan turned toward him. "Mr. Kent, would you like to explain how your credentials were used to modify ownership records without authorization?" Kent stammered, It must have been a clerical mistake." "Then why," Callahan continued, "did your HOA immediately file construction permits and hire contractors within a week of that mistake?" Silence. The judge leaned forward. "Answer the question, Mr. Kent." Kent opened his mouth but no words came out. Rebecca more quickly stood. "Your Honor, my client exercises administrative oversight but does not directly handle." Callahan cut her off, his voice sharp. "Your Honor, we have bank records showing a payment made from Greenfield HOA's development fund to a county clerk, the same day the false addendum was filed." A murmur swept through the courtroom like a wave. At that moment, I looked down at my hands. They were trembling slightly, not with fear, but with the weight of years of helplessness finally finding direction. This wasn't about land anymore, it was about integrity, about standing up to the arrogance of power. The trial continued for hours. Witnesses testified, surveyors, clerks, contractors. One by one, the pieces fell into place, painting a picture of deliberate trespass. Greenfield HOA had rushed development to avoid scrutiny, confident that I was too small to fight them. But they were wrong. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the stand. The courtroom fell silent. "Mr. Anderson," the judge said, "please tell us, in your own words, what happened." I took a deep breath. "Your Honor, this land was my father's dream. He worked 2 jobs to buy it. He used to say it was the one thing he could leave behind for his family. After he passed, I made sure to protect it, every inch of it. Then one morning, I saw strangers digging into that dream. I thought it was a mistake. I thought people couldn't just take what isn't theirs. But they did. And they built 12 houses on it, believing no one would stop them." I paused, meeting the judge's gaze. I didn't fight back at first. I wanted to see how far they'd go. I wanted them to finish, so that when I came to court, the evidence wouldn't be dirt and blueprints, but real walls, real roofs, and real proof of how greed blinds people. For a moment, even the reporters stopped writing. Callahan nodded approvingly. The judge sighed softly and said, "Thank you, Mr. Anderson. You may step down." By the end of the day, it was clear, Greenfield HOA was cornered. Their lawyers scrambled to request a settlement. But the judge denied their motion for delay. "This court will see justice served," she declared. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. I walked down the courthouse steps, feeling both exhausted and alive. The wind carried the smell of rain and asphalt, and for the first time in years, I felt like the land itself was breathing again. That night, as I sat at my kitchen table reviewing the court transcripts, Callahan called. "You did well today," he said. "I just told the truth," I replied. He chuckled. "Sometimes, that's the sharpest weapon." I looked out the window toward the distant lights of the villas. They stood beautiful and still, monuments built on deceit. But soon, they would belong to the man they were stolen from. And the best part? They didn't even know it yet. The courtroom was packed when the judge entered for the final verdict. It had been 3 long weeks of hearings, witness statements, and legal chess moves. Every seat was filled: journalists, homeowners from the new villas, curious townspeople, even the mayor himself sat in the back row pretending not to be invested. The tension was thick enough to touch. You could almost feel it vibrating through the air as Judge Harper adjusted her glasses and opened the file. After reviewing all presented evidence, she began, her voice steady and deliberate. "This court finds the defendant, Greenfield HOA, and its acting manager, Thomas Kent, guilty of property fraud, forgery, and illegal construction on private land." The words hung in the air like thunder. I closed my eyes for a moment, exhaling slowly. It was over, the months of frustration, the quiet rage, the endless waiting. It was finally over. The judge continued, the plaintiff, Mr. James Anderson, is hereby declared the sole legal owner of the property on which the 12 villas have been constructed. Furthermore, Greenfield HOA is ordered to compensate Mr. Anderson for damages, emotional distress, and all associated legal costs. The total restitution is set at $4.7 million. Gasps filled the courtroom. Some of the homeowners began murmuring anxiously, realizing the homes they had bought now legally belonged to someone else. Cameras flashed as reporters scribbled furiously. The judge wasn't done. Additionally, she said firmly, Mr. Thomas Kent will face a separate criminal investigation for document forgery and bribery of a public official. This court recommends immediate suspension of all HOA development permits pending review. Kent's face went white. The confident developer who once smirked at me now looked like a ghost trapped in daylight. Callahan leaned close and whispered, "That's it. You just won it all." But I didn't smile. I just nodded slowly, letting the weight of those words settle. Outside the courthouse, a swarm of reporters surrounded us. Microphones stretched toward my face as voices shouted questions all at once. "Mr. Anderson, how does it feel to win? Will you sell the villas? Do you plan to press further charges?" I paused before answering. "It feels right," I said. "Not because I won, but because truth won. You can't build your future on someone else's foundation. Eventually, it cracks." That line made the evening headlines. Over the next few weeks, the aftermath unfolded like a movie I had already seen in my mind. The HOA crumbled under legal scrutiny. Investors pulled out. Lawsuits piled up. Thomas Kent resigned publicly before being arrested. The county clerk who accepted the bribe confessed in exchange for a reduced sentence. And me? I suddenly found myself the legal owner of 12 fully built villas. Each one was modern, furnished, and valued far higher than the land they stood on. The irony wasn't lost on me. At first, I didn't know what to do. People made offers, real estate agents, developers, even the homeowners who had unknowingly bought into the fraud. Some begged, others threatened. A few of them cried. I wasn't a cruel man. I knew they were victims too. So instead of throwing them out, I offered a solution. They could buy the homes again, directly from me, this time, lawfully. No middlemen, no HOA. I gave them fair prices, not inflated ones. Most agreed. Some thanked me. One woman even hugged me with tears in her eyes. "You saved our family," she said. "We had no idea." I smiled and said softly, "You just bought your home twice. Make sure you own it forever this time." Life slowly returned to normal. But normal didn't feel the same anymore. The land was quiet again, but not empty. It stood as a reminder, a symbol of patience, justice, and the kind of victory that doesn't need shouting. Sometimes, I'd drive past the villas at sunset. The light would hit the rooftops the same way it used to strike my father's fields all those years ago. The soil was still the same, even if the walls were new. I imagined him standing beside me, smiling proudly. "You did good, son," he would have said. One evening, Callahan joined me for coffee on the porch. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain and cedar. "You know," he said, "you could have taken them to the cleaners, claimed ownership of every villa outright. Why didn't you?" I took a slow sip. "Because my father didn't teach me to take what isn't mine. He taught me to protect what is." He nodded. "That's rare these days." We sat in silence for a while, watching the horizon. The town had started to call me the man who outsmarted the HOA. The nickname made me laugh, but it wasn't wrong. I hadn't used force or revenge. I'd used patience, truth, and time, the three tools the greedy never master. Months later, a letter arrived from the county. It was an official apology, rare, formal, and sincere. They offered to rename the small road leading into the villas. They wanted my suggestion for the new name. I thought about it for a few days. Then I wrote back just one word. Legacy. Now, when I drive past the sign that reads Legacy Lane, I remember every sleepless night, every insult, every quiet moment of doubt that almost broke me. But I also remember why I didn't give up. Because sometimes, justice doesn't roar, it whispers. It waits. And when it finally arrives, it stands taller than any villa ever could. As the sun dips behind the row of houses that were once stolen and now rightfully mine, I whisper one last thing to the empty air. You built on my land. I built on your mistake. And somewhere deep beneath that soil, my father's land finally rests, free, whole, and home again.